All right, welcome to the Scottish Clans. I'm Clint. Thank you for joining me. For this video, unlike many of the other ones, is not going to be connected to a podcast episode. This is meant to be digested visually, as my goal here is to show the connection between the different kindreds descended from Summerled. And you can find it at a really quick Google image search. You can find a bunch of different pedigree charts of the descendants of Summerled, but the emphasis on those is the individuals, the people descended from him. And yes, sometimes they do include if they begat a major branch of one of these clans, then it might show it in there, but it's almost like a footnote to it. It's the point of this video, to show how the different branches of the descendants of Summerled relate to each other. And you can see very quickly it's going to turn into a discussion about the different branches of the clan Donnell, and not so much the McDougals, McRorys, and I'll explain that here in a minute. But I chose to use his Gaelic appellation here, the way that Summerled, Sorle in Gaelic. Sorley is sometimes it's been anglicized, but Summerled in its more Scandinavian form here. Summerled's an interesting character. In some historiography of this gentleman, he is painted as the Gaelic hero fighting back against the power of the Vikings, taking back the Scottish territory that was taken by the Vikings, and it's a Gaelic versus Viking conflict, and that's completely misrepresented. But it goes back a long ways that's painted like that, like clear back into the late Middle Ages, early modern period. But it was really like this. The cultural context that Summerled comes from is a very mixed one. It's very, they've got a lot of Viking blood, but there is still a very good foundation of Gaels there. We can see that the Vikings soon became subsumed into this Gaelic culture. They all eventually are speaking Gaelic, and but while their Norse ancestry is still recognized, and there's some DNA stuff going on here, and that's kind of a tangent here, so I'm not going to get into it, but you can read about some DNA work that's been done with the descendants of Summerled. What I want to show you is how all these different kindreds that are descended from him are related to each other. Where do they fit in? Where does this one break off and become its own branch, major branch? Some of these branches became basically their own clans, a clan in their own right. And sometimes they played along with the bigger group, and sometimes they did not. So let's get into it. So I don't know how to pronounce Summerled's wife's name's Ragnhildur, Olaf's daughter. I'm pretty sure that's Olaf's daughter, but this one here, I might be not doing that any justice at all. And guys, I'm not doing this PowerPoint and presentation mode because we can zoom in a little bit better and scroll down as we go, which I think gives you a better visual of this. But one thing I want you to know is if you want to copy a PDF of what I've created here, then you're going to be able to find that over at scottish-clans.com. And I haven't created, as the time I'm recording this, the exact scottish-clans.com/ something or other. But I may throw it up here on the screen as I'm going, but I don't have to say that right now. All right, so moving down. So we have Summerled. He has several kids. And the ones that we're most concerned with, as far as that's another thing about looking at what I've created here, is if they don't create a major branch of the family, then we're not going to even discuss them. They're not unimportant. His daughter Bethug, in other sources I've seen it, she's like, I know how dads feel about their little girls, and so if we were just to not say she's important, if I were Summerled, I'd be very, very concerned with that. But she does not beget a significant kindred here. But it's not because she's a female, because we will see that come into play here. But Gilbrige, Angus, Olaf, we don't see prominent kindreds coming from them either, so we're not going to discuss them, and that will be a pattern all the way down through this. Okay, to get into this, Summerled's oldest son, that the way we understand it here, is Dougal. and he begets the MacDougals. The MacDougals are the senior kindred or clan descending from Summerled. Sometimes this group of clans are called the McSorleys. In R. Andrew MacDonald's Kingdom of the Isles, or Kings of the Isles, I'm not looking at it right now. That's easy enough to find it with what I've just given you. He calls them the McSorleys all the time. Other good sources to study about this, aside from R. Andrew MacDonald and the Kingdom of the Isles, I believe is what the exact title is. There also John Bannerman has written a ton on the lordship of the Isles. There's just a couple of amongst many others that you could read up on. So Dougal is the senior son here. And so you get the MacDougals. So they are the senior kindred. Then he has nephews from Ranald, and they are Rory and Donald. I've used this spelling of Donald because never in the Gaelic do you see a D on the end of this name. And so I favor this spelling because it's more phonetically similar to the Gaelic. Although I'm not a Gael, and you can see this should be something like Rory, and it's not. And I'm just going with Rory because I'm really not sure how close I'm pronouncing, but I think I'm close on Donald. Anyway, so Rory and Donald are Dougal's nephews. Really, so here's the major foundation kindreds that we get off to start talking about right here. And you can see of the two, Rory and Donald, Rory's the older one. So really, the very beginning of this kindred, the MacDonalds are the little brother. They're the junior. And up until the Wars of Independence for Scotland, where we see Angus Og or Angus Og, we see him side with Robert the Bruce, and then obviously that was the winning side, and so that's when the MacDonalds start to become the senior, the most powerful of these three kindreds. But up until the Wars of Independence, they were the little brother kindred, and we see the title Ri Inchigal, or King of the Hebrides. We see that alternate back and forth between the MacDougals and the McRorys. So that's when the MacDonalds become top dog amongst these kindreds here, is after the Wars of Independence, and they are rewarded for siding with Robert the Bruce. I know some of you who are a MacDougall or a Cummin don't feel like you were done right by Robert the Bruce, but we will give him this. He did remember very well those who sided against him and those who sided with him, and he was very generous in expressing gratitude for those who sided with him. And so you see kindreds like the MacDougals, they barely hold on as a kindred, but they do, to their credit, and the Cummins. They survive this, they come out, and generations and generations down the road, you still have a MacDougall clan and a Cummin clan, the Cummings of Altyre. But prior to that, the MacDougals had huge territory. So did the Cummins. Cummins were all over Scotland. But then you see the MacDonalds and the Campbells, who were loyal to Robert the Bruce, rise up. And that's back in the day when the MacDonalds and Campbells were on the same side, playing along nice with each other. Anyway, so let's follow the history of the MacDonalds. We'll actually pick up the McRorys here in a bit because they become important. So Donald, the name giver to this kindred, he has two sons, Angus More and Alistair More. Now, this More, you see the More and the Og pop up a lot here. Now, literally, it means More is great and Og is little, or big and little. But now, those of you who actually speak Gaelic can pop up here and correct me if I'm wrong. But it looks like you see these terms be used as senior and junior. And not just with father and son, as you see it here with Angus or Angus. I think it's close. Angus. Once again, Gaelic speakers, help me out. Help me out. Tell me in the comments if I'm anywhere close to this. But Alistair More and his nephew, Alistair Og, so we see that senior and junior being used, uncle and nephew here. What I didn't do too much, as soon as I saw that Alistair More is the ancestor of the McAllisters of the Loop, then I stop following that kindred, okay? Because you don't need to know the whole chiefs of the McAllisters. All you need to know is this is where that clan gets its start. So, and that's the intent of this whole video. Now, I put a question mark here because some sources that I saw said that this Alistair is the ancestor of the McAllisters of the Loop. I lean toward this one, Alistair More, being the ancestor, but I just throw it in there just to show you that some people think that. Now, this Alistair, he kind of kept with his cousins over here, the MacDougals, during the Wars of Independence, which did not go well. As he's getting farther into that, you can see he didn't make it all the way through those wars, but he's definitely seeing that was involved there. And his branch of the line here, they leave probably because he's the rising star here, and they settle in Ireland as Gallaglass kindreds. So a lot of the Gallaglasses that come from the MacDonald line come from Alistair Og. Not all of them, but many of them. So his little brother, Angus Og, or Angus Og, Angus Jr., the MacDonalds of Islay, the Lords of the Isles, will descend through him and not through his older brother, Alistair. So here we see that the MacAllisters of the Loop are probably the oldest branch off clan of the MacDonalds. You can also see something important here with clans in that you'll see this branch, instead of calling themselves after the sons of Donal, they'll adopt the name of his younger son Alistair as for their surname. Those who become Lords of the Loop, which is on the Kintyre Peninsula, but it's a little bit farther north. Anyway, without telling you exactly where it is, I should have had a map for that, but I guess I didn't. So that's the oldest branch, cadet branch of the MacDonalds. Now, very quickly after that, so we have these two other. So you have Alistair Og, a couple of daughters here, who I showed who they married there. I don't show that for every daughter, but I did for them because I had the room still. The farther down this you go, the more creative you have to be with space. So you have Angus Og and Eoin Sprangach. This is John. Ian and Eoin are two different ways of saying this. If you're talking about them, my understanding in Gaelic is you'd be using the word Sean to refer to John. But if you're talking to him, it would be a Eoin. And the way that we have two different right here ways of expressing that, Eoin and MacIan, or Ian. And so you have the MacIans of Ardenamerican, who are the next oldest branch of the MacDonalds. We get that MacDonalds of Islay beginning here, so that's the main trunk of the tree, but this becomes a branch, the MacIans of Ardenamerican. So once again, an older branch, not the oldest, not as old as the MacAllisters of the Loop would come from one generation earlier, but here, this Eoin, you see them break off and they become the MacIans of Ardenamerican. Probably the least popular branch of the MacDonalds within the MacDonald kindred, because a few generations later, MacIan of Ardenamerican, the chief, turns in one of the chiefs of one of the other branches to be executed, and then they go back and get him back. And anyway, they side with the government against the MacDonald kindred later down the road, but that's another tangent that I'm not going to follow. So, but they're an old branch, not the oldest, but an old branch. So we have the MacDonalds of Islay. We get to start to see that develop here. So Angus Og's children are right here. Eoin of Islay, he's the one that's referred to as Good John of Islay in some later sources. And then you have Moira, Anya, and Eoin Fruch. I hope I'm close on that. And I'm not going to get too deep into this. He's actually an illegitimate son, so it says, of Angus Og, with the Lord of Glencoe, who is named MacHenry. And so MacHenry's daughter and Angus Og have an illegitimate child. And I don't know a lot about this. I didn't dig too deep in this, but they begat the MacDonalds of Glencoe. Okay, so that's where that branch comes in here. Let's go back to the Islay branch, they're actually the main trunk. So Good John of Islay has two wives. First, he marries Anya McRory. Some sources you'll see her referred to as Amy, as they anglicize her name. So from her, they have these three kids here. The main one that you need to be concerned with is the oldest one, Ranal, which you can notice that I've underlined the oldest kid. Anyway, Ranal, from him, we get next generation, his son Alan, and that where you get the MacDonalds of Clan Ranal, named after this Ranal right here. Then we have his nephew, so Alan's nephew, Alistair begets the MacDonalds of Glengarry. So the MacDonalds of Clan Ranald and the MacDonalds of Glengarry are very closely related. But good John of Islay sets aside Anya McRory, and I don't know how that worked back then. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how it worked. I'm just going to tell you. Because he sees Margaret Stuart, the daughter of who will become King Robert II. This is the first Stuart king of Scotland. One thing I learned about him reading Steve Boardman's The Campbells that I've mentioned in a lot of my podcast episodes. In fact, one of my episodes I just read straight from it when I was talking about the origin of the Campbells, is that Robert II was very friendly and very interactive with the Gaelic world. He wasn't a Stuart king that, like his descendants would become, who was like, you know what, I'm going to stick it to these Highlanders because they don't follow along very good, and they don't always do what I tell them to do, and so we're gonna do what we can to bring them to heel. He was very friendly with the Highlanders and the Gaelic world. Probably, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say he spoke Gaelic. I don't think I ever read that, but it looked like with his involvement in that world that he probably did. Anyway, so good John of Islay sets aside Anya McRory, doesn't just completely kick her whole side of the family to the curb, because here's the deal. She is the heiress to these McRorys back up here. That line ends in her. She marries him, and so what you have, the MacDonalds of Clan Ranald basically becomes the modern face of the Clan McRory. So all that used to be the lordship of Garmorin, I think is what they called it, but it was quite a substantial chunk of territory held by the McRorys because they were a big deal. But as that line ends in the heiress, Anya, and good John of Islay marries her, and so I'm not trying to say that he was I don't know what he did to Anya, like as far as setting her aside, like, hey, I'm not married to you anymore. But he did everything that he inherited through her, he gave to her descendants. And so the MacDonalds of Clan Ranald and MacDonalds of Glengarry are I don't know if you would call them rebranded Clan McRory, but basically the territory that this side of the family holds is the old lordship that the McRorys held. While the lordship of the Isles is going to descend through his Stuart wife. All right, and I didn't have enough room, so even though these generations are completely offset here, this group here is the same generation as this group here. All right, that's what you do with the space you got. So we come down here, and so good John of Islay's heir to the lordship of the Isles is going to be Donald of Islay. And here's where we see some of the subsequent major branches developing here. So Donald inherits the lordship. His brother, who marries a Bisset, and the Bisset, they're like some of these other names that we've seen. They're like the McRorys, really. They kind of evaporate as a major kindred, but back in these days, the Bissets were a very powerful Norman descended family. Eoin More, or John, the great John, he marries a Bisset and inherits through his Bisset wife, major lands in Northern Ireland, in Antrim. And so this is where we see the MacDonalds of Dunyveg and the Glens, they sometimes call them. We see that Clan Donald, we see them get their foothold in Northern Ireland through him. So the MacDonalds of Dunyveg, or Clan Donald South, or Clan Ian Vor, anyway, the different ways that this kindred has been referred to, that's where they come from. So, and then Clan Donald North is still in the works. And then from another brother, Alistair Carach, we see the MacDonalds of Keppoch develop. And then to kind of wrap this up, we get down here a few generations without having to say all of them out loud. Here we see the Obiolans there. We talked a lot about them lately. We see the next two, Celestine, the MacDonalds of Loch Alsh, they kind of go away. Their chief is the one who's tracked down by MacIan of Ardenamerican and executed, and that line just kind of goes away. But this line does not. The MacDonalds of Slate, the current recognized senior leader of the entity called Clan Donald. Right now, I've talked about this before. Like, what does a clan look like today? Is it really a clan, or is it a clan society? And I don't mean to get into all that. You call it whatever you want, but the senior representative of all this kindred right here is the MacDonald of Slate. And so that comes from this Hugh, or Ushton. And so Hugh's I should have actually put Ushton in here, but Hugh is the anglicized version of that name, because the MacDonalds of Slate are also known as Clan Donald North or Clan Ushton, as a Gaelic way of referring to this branch of the Clan Donalds. And like I said, today they are the senior line. So it's interesting, kind of ironic, that they're one of the latest branches of Clan Donald to develop, with this Hugh living in the late 1400s. But they become the senior line. But they're one of the youngest branches of the Clan Donald. So I hope that was helpful for you. You can see how all these different, clear back, going back to Summerled, and we've done some other stuff talking about his lineage and going back up the tree from him, but this is meant to show how all of the different branches of his descendants fit together, with the emphasis being on the clans that develop here and not the individuals, which you could find that on any old Google image search, like I said at the beginning. So if you want a PDF copy of this, go to scottish-clans.com, and I'll have, like right now, I'll probably have flashing up there the exact way you can find that. But if you just go to the .com, just the main website, there's links there to get there too. So either way, I hope that was useful for you. Leave comments and questions down below, and correct me on my Gaelic. If for all you Gaels, it's a call to help me get better at it. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Marsh and Lev and Drasta.